We've done the infant mother matching, and we've done the corona, the contact tracing, etc. Those presentations I sent to you. I sent you the link for the presentation and the videos, the YouTube links. So today we're going to do event and location sharing. And as I said, if you have any other particular requests, please send them to me. I'll be glad to entertain. And I added Omni troubleshooting. I thought that would be a good one. And we'll move on. Why do we want to share events, whether it be alert events or other location events, let's say? Well, we need to get that information out to third-party systems. And what are some of these third-party systems? So initially, the first interface that we did was for paging. So we want to get a pager message out to a pager. That's why the module that we're going to be speaking about mostly is called the Elpas pagers. But don't be confused. It's not just pagers. It's everything that it's a general purpose interface, right? And we also have interfaces to DECT systems that are two ways, and we're going to talk about that. Building management systems, right? So we send, for example, to the Honeywell building management, the Siemens building management system, the various building management systems that we share our events with them as well. Security management systems, same way. We share with other third parties. Emails. And by the way, in these, if I talk about building management systems, also messaging systems, right? So you have general purpose. I know Siemens has a messaging server. That too, you want to be able to send to these servers using their protocols. Email, you want to be able to send out an email. We discussed that last week when we were talking about hygiene violations. You want to send an email to that individual. CCTV, right? You've got like point of sale type systems. You have an event, you want to send a command, say, okay, flag this event with this camera and store that information, or create an event within your CCTV so that you can replay that future. So again, sending from Omni to the third party. Then we've got nurse call, of course, a lot of interfaces for nurse call. You want to share events, wireless calls, presence, etc. Porter management. You see the diagram on the right. That's just an architecture of what we have going on in Toronto in Humber River Hospital. You see the various interfaces. So we've got the Porter management system, and we also have the operating room management by Steris, ED management, all these various tools. You want to be able to share your alarms with them or share location. And there are plenty of more examples. Those are just a few. Introduction, why we need event sharing. I'm trying not to call it integration. It's more of, okay, we have an event, we want to share it. It is a type of integration, but it's pretty simple. And now the question is, okay, to code or not to code? So in Omni, we've got two mechanisms for integration. We've got our SDK and our web services. So you can sit down, write an application, just about any platform, any language, and log into Omni, set variables, set values, get values, create instances of objects, get lists of tags, of locations, and get, of course, events, right? So you can do that using the web services and SDK. So that's fine. That's if you want to code, right? But what if you don't want to code, and now you just want to be able to get Omni off the shelf and start sending information from Omni to third-party systems? Let's have a look at various interfaces within Omni that we can use, basically, except for the last one, which is coding, without coding. So first of all, the most basic is you set an output in Omni. You set an output in an alert. You could use the service board to manually set. You could use the map to set the outputs. But basically, you have a dry contact output someplace. And you want to turn it on, turn it off. And that could, very often, we have a lot of people who do interfaces to, for example, CCTV. They just take I/O devices and interface using dry contact. Now, these contacts could be Elpas, or we also have the Modbus interface for the, we typically use the Advantech 6000 series of IPIOs you can put around, so it doesn't necessarily have to be an Elpas IO. So that's one. Then we have a Wiegand. So that's if you use the ALC, right? The ALC exciter, it's got terminal blocks and dip switches for Wiegand. So you can set the event that a tag enters, let's say an LF or any event, any badge event essentially, you can then use the controller to send the response via Wiegand to a third-party controller, right? So that's one way. The local control feedback. So I'm not really going to go into details. I had a detailed slide on this, but I'd rather go spend the time on Elpas pagers. Local control feedback is, you know what? Somebody tell me what local control feedback is. Can somebody tell me? Let's make this a little bit interactive. Come on, Davide, you know what, or Filippo, or when you have local control, you have a controller, an ELC controller, right?
Yeah, the local control send the events from ELC to Iris.
Well,
or on a ADP display.
Right. So you set up an event server on the ELC. So that's an IP address. So the ELC, the controller, sends messages to its host, which is
display or to Iris or Omni.
Right. But you can set up another. Here, let me demonstrate quickly on my readers. So if I go to here, I can set up my rules in local control, right? That we're familiar with. If you're not, then it's not important. And under extended properties, I've got set remote serve. No. Set events.
No. Yeah.
The
I don't
event
know
server.
what is the remote server.
Sorry?
I don't know what is the remote server.
Okay, the remote server is if you want to have, let's say, a reader in your home behind a NAT device, so it's got a local address, and you want to the reader to, or the controller, communicate with an internet server, Omni, in the cloud somewhere, right? Okay. So you want to be able to set, okay, this reader should now report to this IP address, not within the internal network. But getting back to our conversation, the event server is when you define a feedback rule in local control, it basically sends an XML packet to that point. Now, there's no iris in the loop, no need for Omni. Strictly between the controller and the third-party device. And it could also be an Elpas display, so then you have a single display showing alarms for multiple controllers without needing for an Omni server. Right? Mm-hmm. So that is one possibility of sharing events. You can have the controller send directly to the third party, and then the third party gets that packet and parses, etc. Right? So that's local control feedback, and maybe we'll have a separate session just on local control, and we'll discuss it. But now we're going to go to user configured messaging. What's user configured messaging? When I define a module within Omni that then takes event information and sends it to a third party. So we've got the Elpas pagers, that's one module. We've got bulletin board. Anybody familiar with the bulletin board extension? Raise their hand.
Nope.
Nobody? Okay. So the bulletin board extension is like Elpas pagers, but it's more designed for like a marquee display, like one of these LED displays, you know, all that, show one at a time and kind of rotate. So That's the bulletin board. I'll, if we have the time, I'll go into it quickly. Relocation pump, that's the outgoing extension that sends to a third party the location changes based on a filter. And FTP reporter, that's an old utility that we had that basically it's an application outside of Omni that connects to Omni and sends a flat file containing a list of tags and their locations to some file somewhere. Let's move on. So this is the slide that is probably most important. And if we look at it, we've got the Elpas pages, the bulletin board, and the location pump, all using what we call serial interfaces. And you can have different types of serial interfaces in Omni. So if I quickly look through here on the bottom, we've got the serial interface, that is the RS-232, TCP gateway. So that's when I am a TCP client to a third-party TCP server, and I connect, and as soon as Omni starts up, it connects to that TCP server and proceeds to send it messages whenever necessary based on the rules that you define. TCP server, okay, so now Omni becomes a TCP server and a third party can connect to it. So certain other third parties want to connect to you, or certain expose a port whether you're connecting to it. In the case, for example, of the HL7 interface, we want to set up a TCP server so the HL7 server in the organization can then connect to Omni. So we have TCP gateway, that's the TCP client and TCP server. UDP, where we want to pump UDP messages. Right? UDP, that's our basically, that we use that technology for communicating with our readers. File output, okay, you just want to, whenever we send a message, we want to write it to a file. And it's got different possibilities of creating new files, overwriting, etc., or just appending to an existing file. So that's file output. So you can have Omni just pump the messages to a file. Email agent, you can have Omni send messages to an email address. And it can send an HTTP request. So there are a few, for example, Honeywell did an EBI interface. I don't know, anybody familiar with EBI? That's a Honeywell technology. It's a building management system. So they originally wrote a whole SDK-based interface with Omni, but then we did, okay, we don't need all that. All we need is to get the alarms, fine. So I use an HTTP request, and they have their own protocol for that. It's sort of like a REST API. Then we've got specific serial interfaces that actually typically point to another serial interface. So if I look at, for example, the ASCOM OLP, I want to be able to interface with the ASCOM system via their ASCOM Unite. I want to send them their OLP protocol. So I say, okay, Elpas pager sends it to the OLP interface. And then within the OLP interface, I then define, okay, I select a serial interface. So I can define multiple serial interfaces, multiple TCP gateways, whatever, clients, and say, okay, this one work with that one. And then I've got, for example, a Polycom Kirk interface that I want to point to another serial interface, let's say to another TCP. Astra, that's an interface for DECT phones, right? I want it to point to a TCP interface. And so the Elpas pager sends it to the Astra to the TCP interface, and off to the third party. We have the NEC as well. Some of these, actually, they embed within the serial interface its own TCP layer. Some of them rely on the TCP interface, the serial interface. That's how we handle pumping message to a third party by defining what we call serial interfaces and having the Elpas pagers or bulletin boards point to that and send it to us. Let's demonstrate. So if I go to serial interfaces, right now I've got a whole bunch defined. All right, so let's say my messaging server, it's a TCP client, TCP interface. I give it the address and the port. Basically all it does is it connects to that address and port, and then when I go to Elpas pagers, I simply point to that TCP, and every time Elpas pagers gets an alert that you define, it'll send it here. Or a serial interface, add by type. These are the various types of serial interfaces I've got. So I've got this one, which we call it problem with naming, but this is the RS-232, right? This is where I set up my COM settings. You're all familiar with setting up serial ports. I'm sure you've done plenty of them. And so you're saying, okay, this is my serial port to my DECT RS-232, let's say. Maybe it's an ASCOM serial interface, right? So it's a, and then you want to connect your computer to that paging system. Then you set up the communication properties. Here you have a nice little COM log that lets you debug or watch the messages as they come through, right? So that's an example of setting up a serial interface. And as I said, I can, if I have multiple RS-232s, that's fine. I can have multiple serial interfaces. If I have multiple TCP clients, I can do that as well. TCP servers, UDPs, I can set up as many serial interfaces as I want, multiples of the same type. And then let's go on to the Elpas pagers. So what do I do to set up the Elpas pagers module? First of all, I need to define at least one holder. That's just for historical reasons. You need to address a holder within the paging module. And the paging module will send for each holder that message. I'm not going to go into that. So define and define the paging module. After you've defined the holder, you want to define a paging module. Go into, let's have a look, Elpas pagers, right? So here's my paging module. I can define as many as I want, right? I can add by type. I can do another paging module. And each one can send it to a different destination. One to a paging system, the other to a messaging system, the other to a building management system, the other to a nurse call system, right? I can have multiple Elpas pager modules and multiple serial interfaces. So I go to my paging module and I'm setting it up and I see, okay, this is my serial interface. I choose which serial interface I want to send it to. And then I say, okay, give me a protocol. So you can manually define a protocol. You can put control characters in here. You can put filler. You can put variables such as the status. Is the alert being opened or is it being closed? And the ID of the event so that when you close the event, it'll know which event to close, right? You have to attach. And then the MSG is basically the message for that alert. So I go into my alert, right? Let's say I go into my staff attack alert and I have this message, attack badge at reader. And then this paging module is going to take that and build all of this. It'll add status ID event before the MSG. I can get rid of everything else. I can just leave, let's say, for example, the ID or just the MSG, and it'll just send that. Now, let's say I want to send through the paging module a message that's different than I've defined in the alert. So here I've defined this message. But in the paging module, since I'm going to be sending it, it has to be shorter or whatever, you want to send to something else, then you can go into here and do the message, do a different. So I want to hear, I just want to write badge at reader. That's it. And that's the message that I wanted to send. You know, it's not the same one as appearing on the Elpas screens on the web or on a display panel, or whatever. I want to use a different protocol here. Let me just delete that. Okay. Now I can also send a cancellation. When that alert is closed in Omni, do I want to send a cancellation back to that system? So if it's a paging system, you want to send it a clear so that it removes it from the pagers. Right? Mm-hmm. And then what would be the cancellation? So the protocol for the initiation, sending the alert when it's triggered, will be different than the protocol when it's canceled. Now, if I decide I want to use here CAP is an HTTP protocol, and if I want to use that, then this is where I basically edit my XML, right? And it basically sends this entire XML and it embeds in the XML whatever information, these variables, event ID, the MSG, etc. Here's the MSG, and it basically goes to that. It's sent via HTTP request to a third party, right? That's really neat. But that's if you're using CAP. If you're using this is like a standard protocol. It's what we call the line protocol for the ASCOM system. So if I look at my event log and I push the tag, I trigger an alert. Well, it went away pretty quick, so that's because I'm getting auto cancellation. Responder arrives at this. Let's disable that. That's probably what's doing it.
Attack on a staff member.
Right. Okay. So if I go to the Elpas pagers again, just let's clear that. Oh, okay. Okay. So if I go back to my Elpas pagers. Right. Obviously, in the Elpas pagers, besides defining a holder, we have to select which alert we want this Elpas pager to send. Right. You're sending different alerts to different annunciation systems. Right. Here you see that it sent this event. It's actually not showing. This doesn't show you. But if I create a debug log, I'll see the whole string that it's sending. Okay, so that's Elpas pagers, how we set it up. We've got all these different possibilities. Next one is the location pump. What's a location pump? Theoretically, if you want to send a location change to a third party, you could have just defined a location alert and then send the location alert message via Elpas pagers to the third party, and that way you get location. But that requires definition of a location alert, which basically consumes Omni resources. So if we don't need, we have what we call the core events in Omni. That's a location, a button press, whatever. They're not alert events, they're just the core events. They're happening all the time. I want to be able to send a core event, a location event out to a third party without having to define an alert for it. Right? So for that, we've got our outgoing. Here we have for OSCO, I can create another one, add by type, under modules, and I have outgoing. Right? So if the settings of the outgoing is simply, I define a badge filter. Where do I define badge filters? Up here. You define a badge filter which says, okay, I've got certain badge groups. I select a badge group, reader group, status types, and I give it a name, David F. filter. And then when I go down to the outgoing, I can select the David filter, and it will only send, question? And it will only send the messages that comply with this filter, and it will send it to this serial interface, right? So if I want to send it to a UDP, a TCP, OLP, etc. And there is a default format that it will send, but if you would like, you can put in your own variables, right? And build your own format. And these are all one-way messages to third parties. And then the third parties should be able to pick that up and process it and do whatever it wants with it. And to finish, we're going to look at the bulletin board. So in the bulletin board, similar to Elpas pagers, you define which alerts. You can filter by location, so you can have a generic alert for the entire site, and bulletin boards would only show messages from its location, or you can have separate alerts, either way. You can select a serial interface such of TCP, UDP, RS-232, etc. Or we then added the optional UDP settings here. Why? Because we have customers that have a very large number of bulletin boards in North America. And they have hundreds of bulletin boards all over the site. And they said, okay, why do I need to have, so then for each one, I'm going to need a separate serial interface, let's say UDP, and a separate bulletin board object. That's a lot to manage. So they would prefer to embed the address already straight in the bulletin board object. And we added that as an option. So you can either use an existing serial interface or you can define the UDP. Now this has a scroll time. So you've got like one of these marquees that go up on the ceiling, and it's scrolling the open events. So if there are 3, it's scrolling them. It displays the first, then the second, then the third. And the time in seconds that it displays each one is sent here. This is where you define the protocol, the prefix and the suffix, right? This is most of these devices that we have, that we've come in contact with. You need to send it, let's say, an RS-232 message, and prefix it with something, maybe add something to the end. Again, you can have control characters here. And this is the default, meaning if there's nothing showing on the screen, what you want it to show. It could be the time of day or whatever. So that's, you can see the documentation on this if you want more details. Okay, we're at, we passed a half hour, so that was the bulletin board. DECT handset integration, just one of the interesting things about DECT handsets that we've done, whether it be the Astra, the Polycom, which is going to go away soon, right, Adrian and Peratle? And the NEC, is that device itself, the handset, can be used to manage the alert and actually acknowledge and close that alert. And the handset could be used to trigger an alert, just like Iris Go on the mobile, how you can use to set an create an emergency alert from the handset. Here too, you can trigger an alert in Iris using the DECT handset, the NEC or the Astra, which is now called Mitel. Relocation pump we discussed. Yeah.
Sorry, why Polycom is phasing out?
We feel that we haven't really been seeing any sales, any customers really using that extension. And every one of these extensions, we have to find either we have to maintain the hardware for testing, or we rely on our partners to test them for us. And that hardware is not necessarily available anymore. Since we moved to CenTrak, we don't have that hardware anymore to test, and we're kind of dependent on others to test it. We can't, so we have to test it for each release. And that's, yeah. Since they're not, are you, W, do you have customers that are using the Kirk?
Yeah, we use SpectraLink Polycom DECT system.
8,000.
So,
okay, the SpectraLink is different. You're talking about the IP devices?
yeah.
Okay, so those don't use this extension. We send those messages using an XML interface, actually an HTTP interface that we send to those devices, and that actually worked pretty well for display only, not for management, right? So
Exactly.
directly to those SpectraLink IP devices.
SpectraLink IP, but SpectraLink DECT is, we connect with the server via LAN IP connection, but it's not IP devices.
Are you using that with Iris, with Omni?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, so we have to look at that. I want to see if you're using the Polycom, if the Kirk extension or not. That's the question.
It is the XML for SpectraLink, SpectraLink Polycom.
Yeah. All right, let's discuss that after the session.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, web services, I'm not going to get into that now. Maybe I'll do a separate session on just the web services and some existing interfaces. So I'll distribute this presentation. Okay, general questions. Anybody?
Yeah,
What
it's Rene
about,
Schmidt. Yeah.
Yes, Renee.
Yeah, hi, David. So thanks for the presentation. You talk about the documentation for the bulletin board. Is this in the general IRIS documentation, 300 site, or is this a special
It's
document that you have?
probably in the extensions and utilities.
Extensions and utilities, okay.
Right, and check 507. That's got, I think, the best set of documents. Hopefully, with the 5.2, we're preparing the entire set again and rebranding it to Omni, etc. So I hope. But go back to the 507 online and see if you've got the under extensions. There should be the bulletin board there.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
and what about the HL7, David?
What about it?
I mean, how to setting up what is possible to, because someone starting to ask us HL7 protocol.
Yeah. Okay. HL7. I think pretty sure. I mean, I've written plenty of documents on it. I assume they're online, and I have to check. But in general, the HL7. The idea is that we work with the ADT, the admit, discharge, and transfer. We get those events. We're able to basically define what, based on the events, we create the badges, we put them in specific groups, and we set them to certain statuses. On a transfer, we can change the status. On a discharge, we can then either remove or reset status and name on a discharge. So those options it's pretty flexible. And the idea is to save the need of duplicate entries. So you don't have to enter the same tag in the HIS as you do in Omni. So they just have the HIS, it comes in, and the fact that they do a transfer in that HIS, then that automatically maybe allows the tag to move and not alarm when it goes out the door, etc. So it's pretty neat.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question about CCTV interface, David? How is now the possibility to interface CCTV? I mean, which protocol we should use from the CCTV? We just need to point to an IP for the IP camera, or works only with MJ? I remember older version of Iris worked with MJPEG.
Right.
But this is not so common for the CCTV system. And so I will understand how we can work now.
Right. So let me see if I can move this up here. That's better. Yeah, now I could look at you. We weren't really finding that customers were displaying video on Omni clients, but rather the integration with CCTV was that Omni needed to send an event to the third party, to the CCTV. They would get the event, then displayed on their matrix, stored in their history log, so that users can replay it on the video system, not on Omni. Well, the fact that we can pop up a view of live video wasn't very valuable, right? It's might be a nice gimmick as far as sales goes, but for an actual site, if they have a CCTV system, then they have their own software, their own matrix, their own views. So the integration with CCTV is typically us sending the CCTV events, and that can be done using Elpas pages, etc. Usually they have their own protocol, and you can set that up. Getting the other way of displaying, the last time we did was for the American Dynamics with the motion JPEG. We haven't, I know that's not a modern protocol, but the question is there business out there? Do people really want to see video on the Omni client, on the web client, for example? It's capable of doing that, but are we going to bring significant more business if we develop more protocols for the CCTV? I'm not sure. Right? So you have to come in with a pretty good business case for us to implement new protocols. I've got many more things on my mind that I want to develop.
No, sometimes we have. I would say there are two scenarios. I think one is for the wandering, just to have the possibility for the staff to, if they are in front of the iris, to see if a person is going out, to have the pop-up open with the screen that see if really the person is going out or not.
Right.
This is one case is that we have requirement. And the other case is for nurse call. Sometimes we have requirement to have system, nurse call system with speech, with view, with the possibility to view the person that is making the call in their room. So I'm thinking the first one is more interesting on the second, because the second issue comes times to times. It's not a typical issue. But if we can maybe make a sort of, I would say, solution like that, should be interesting to have it for proposed to the customer.
Yeah, but just you're familiar with what we did with the with Skype with Iris Go or Omni Go?
No.
So you know that there's the call location option. So a patient makes a call, nurse gets it on her mobile, right? There's a call location option. And if you put in, there's a certain protocol, it's listed in the documentation, Skype, colon, and then the Skype name, it will open up a video chat with that number. So you can put a tablet on the wall in the residence room and have it running Skype online. And then Iris Go.
And then also you can speak in this way.
You get both voice and video 2 ways. So it's not just looking at but also the resident actually sees the caregiver as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a neat. We'll discuss that on the nurse call. I've got a nurse call
session.
Webinar scheduled as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's in. If
okay, but then for
next Thursday.
Okay, and for the wandering, how we can manage the fact to have the pop-up with the window that check the door, the gate door.
Right now, it's just the MJPEG.
Right now, just the MJ. Yeah, but the MJPEG doesn't work with the new camera that we have now.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's not possible just to set up in some places just an IP address to get the how's called it the video streaming.
Yeah, we have to implement a more modern protocol. What I do suggest is that you can easily send that location or that camera channel to the video system and have them display the video.
Yeah, you mean via contact?
No, you can send a packet. Most of these video systems have their own protocol that you can send it, and we can use Elpas pagers to send that protocol via TCP.
Okay.
Or dry contact, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Great. Okay, anybody else? That was good. So I'll keep you guys updated regarding Monday. I've got to get, what's scheduled for Monday is the Loan Protect app. We've just made some significant, obviously rewrote the application, and we've got a tag that we're using a connected protocol rather than an advertised protocol. So it's a two-way protocol with the BLE between the tag and the app. And what else? Yeah, and the support for near field communication, NFC. So that I have to get, I don't have tags with me. I've got to go into the office, and right now, given the situation, I'm not sure if I'm going to get there. So I'll let you guys know what the status is for Mondays for that Loan Protect. I might reschedule and just change Monday to another topic or something if I don't get the tag in time. So that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye very
Thanks,
much,
David.
David.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you,
Thank you very
David.
much.
Thanks.
Great. I'm
Thank you,
glad.
David. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you, David.
Bye bye.
Welcome.